Okay. So it's my great pleasure to be introducing these two writers to you tonight. Our first feature is Lisa DeSiro, who actually has featured for us before, and this is her new book, Simple as a Sonnet. It'll be up front for you to purchase. And one thing I didn't say when we started is that some of our three rules of Iowa are to read each other, to read each other's work, to buy each other's books, and to write or be written. In other words, tell your story as it is. And we've added another rule to it, which is if you can review an Italian-American writer's work, you should do that because book reviews are very important for all of us. But certainly tonight, you can play your part by buying the books of our features. So Lisa DeSiro is both a writer and an accomplished pianist. Her latest collection of poetry, as I've said, is Simple as a Sonnet from Kelsey Books. She's also the author of another full-length collection, as well as an online chapbook. And her poems have appeared in several literary magazines and anthologies. She works at Boston Conservatory, MIT, Longy School of Music, and Jose Mateo Ballet Theater, which is a new addition, right, to your work. And you can read more about Lisa at thepoetpianist.com. And I would also say that she is a great literary citizen who also ran a series for several years called the Solidarity Salon, which was a really lively and wonderful reading. Maybe you'll resuscitate it. Making it. So please welcome Lisa DeSiro. Thank you, Julia. And yes, that I have had a couple other people ask me about the series, so it might be making a return. Yeah, I did go through a rather big job change recently, where I gave up my full-time job to go back to working as a musician. I've been working for a nonprofit for 17 years and doing the complete works of CPE Bach. It was a music-related project. It went longer than we thought. And then well, it's a whole long story. I don't want to go into all of that, but there were reasons why I did that. And it's one of the reasons why tonight, I often like to do a theme when I do a reading. So my theme tonight is kind of around music. I've incorporated music references in a lot of my poems. I like to write in form. And I'm currently working on a manuscript of poems that were sort of in separate groups, and now I'm finding this common thread of music. So I'm going to read some of those poems, including some from the book that came out in 2021, because there's some music type poems in this one too. And since it's a book with quite a few sonnets in it, I'm going to start out with a sonnet, with one of the sonnets. Hindsight. Looking back does no good for me to ask, how could you not see? The irony, his name was Tom. He was a starving artist drummer who talked dirty and confessed his daily struggle with depression, then revealed another foible, late night looking into people's windows, which was worse. His crime of peeping or to sleep with him. Eyes closed, I stroked his bumpy, frail spine like I was reading Braille. We both were blind and guilty of wanting love. So as a little side note, when this book came out, my father, who is where I get my Italian-American heritage from, he was very excited when my books were published. And when he got a copy of this one and read it, the next time I spoke to him, he said, "Oh, honey, I hope those poems aren't all about you." Because most of the poems, well, the theme of this book is a lot about dating relationships from the perspective of a single woman. And so I kind of fibbed a little. I'm like, no, not all of them, Dad.
About him? Any about him?
I'm sorry?
Any about him? Are there any about him in this book? No. No. This one I'm going to dedicate to a friend whose birthday is today, who was the inspiration for this poem, but he doesn't know that. Hooking up Obad. Early riser, no alarm required. He lurches out of bed, girds himself with yesterday's briefs, slings his guitar across his bare torso. His singing is like his body, rustic, pudding tune. Despite my need to pee, I stay and listen, naked under the sheets. Mere hours ago, it was all mumbled words, fumbling hands, eyes half closed, half-hearted, his caresses. He wouldn't undress either of us. I did everything. After, he fell asleep. He snored, slow cliche, dawn, open window, bird chirps, summer breeze, his drunken wheezing. Now he stacks music on my stomach, pages of chord progressions and lyrics. We smile as they pile up. But I'm remembering my dream. The first man tried to attack me. The second man ran to rescue me, and both were him. I turned from them, peering through tears at a mirror, a blurred reflection, not mine, some younger woman's face behind a bridal veil. She woke me with a whisper. You were never his intended. You will never be the prize he wants to win. Yeah. Notation. Money's tight. I only spend time alone in my cheap sublet studio, listening to a mixtape he made, turning it over and over, replaying. Before our first real gig, we split a pitcher, happy hour, gathering gear, keyboard, guitar, amps, cables wedged behind heavy collapsible risers, slack-limbed, laughing. We couldn't dislodge a thing. How can we get this shit out? I shouted, climbing the pile of equipment. Slipped and fell. Could have broken my neck if he hadn't caught me. Partial to what? Might have been his remark if he could have seen the partial lunar eclipse this evening here with me. He's missing a second phenomenon now. The slats of the window blind form a grand staff where the full moon floats like a perfect whole note drawn between parallel lines. So now I'd like to read a group that's from this manuscript that's kind of trying to come together. And kind of go in a little different direction. And I'm going to start out with a sort of winter-themed poem. The title is a German word that refers to Schubert's song cycle, Winterreise. And Winterreise means winter journeys. Winterreise. This morning's piano lesson was not bad. I'm just gonna let that pass. This morning's piano lesson. Let the key lift your finger up. I practice with the noon sun, my spotlight, counting step by step across a field of frozen snow as if it were an empty stage. And later, when upon the page of unfurled evening tinted pink, the bare trees with indigo ink sketch a silhouette staccato, I'll hum a Schubert tune, bound for home, my breathing rhythmic, body almost metronomic, supported by the ground. You'll help me keep time, right? Yeah, okay. The next few are based on dreams. And this first little group is again a German title referencing a Schumann group, a Schumann piece from Kinderscenen. This is Traummerei, which means dreaming. 1. Drag. Balancing a stack of books, I stumble up the spiral staircase to room 9 and knock. My teacher opens the door. He's dressed in women's clothes, a sheer blouse and a pleated skirt, but wearing men's loafers. You're late, is all he says. 2. Lesson. I sit and adjust the piano bench to the proper height. Another student arrives. My teacher says, now let's demonstrate the importance of staying grounded. He and the student kneel on the floor and grab my ankles. Little by little, their hands creep up my legs, their arms elongate, becoming skinny as snakes, their fingers grip my knees. I miss a few notes, but I keep playing. 3. Food. We sit at opposite sides of a bistro table. On my plate, a meager portion of oatmeal. On my teacher's plate, a heap of stew that steams and smells so good I sneak a taste. He notices. I fear being scolded. But he says, take as much as you want. I made it for you. And I wish, like the previous reader, that I had a recording. Those poems were actually set to music in this wonderful chamber music piece for voice, piano, and viola. So maybe sometime I can present that. It'd be really cool. These are a few that are about my mom and different dreams I had and experiences I had as I was sort of grieving her passing several years ago. She makes a snow angel. The family room is as it was before, with the old stereo system, turntable, 8-track cassette, and the full array of houseplants, ivy, Christmas cactus, ferns, and the dusty upright piano waiting. My father tells me my brother is on his way. Where's your mother? Then through the window, we see her, flat on her back in the snow-covered yard, sweeping her arms and legs up and down as if she's doing jumping jacks, grinning. Looking at pictures. In the family room, side by side on the sofa next to the silent piano, her and her sisters and me holding envelopes full of photographs. She begs us, let me see, and peers at each one by one. Familiar confusion, thinking, I'm so glad she's with us again, but not. She vanishes like a genie. From upstairs, we hear her call, come here. We run down and enter the living room where she's waiting next to the fireplace with her arms crossed. She glares at us, imperial and stern. A descending minor second motif plays over and over. Her body ripples, folds itself, fades. My brother grips my arm. Did you see her? Did you? He watches me nod, dumbstruck. Then his face becomes her face. So now back to a little more real life, but connected. This poem I'm going to read was just featured with MAMA Mama, a project that, that's partnered with the Mom Egg Review, where they take poems and they pair them up with visual artists. And so it kind of prompted me to decide to share this tonight. I'm drawing it. Mathilde Jansen, I believe, is the name of the artist who was paired with this poem. She's Dutch. And if you want to check it out, go to MAMA or Mothers Making Art. You can find it online, or I can give you the link for that. Living room. My mother's seated in her corner chair, stitching. I bring what she requests, a tissue, or a glass of wine. Set it on the side table next to the latest Better Homes and Gardens. Her deft fingers maneuver the needle and thread. My father supines, snoring on the couch. I squeeze onto one end, avoiding his feet until he wakes and makes popcorn and shares with me. He changes the channel. We watch Jeopardy, shouting question answers. My brother is out with friends or on a date or at rehearsal with his band. So for this evening, I'm an only child, but I leave my parents, go upstairs, shut my door, cover my ears, headphones plugged into a Walkman. Do I hear my brother come home? Do I hear my parents say goodnight? Listen. Down in the dark, deserted living room, above the fireplace mantle, the plastic gold Sirocco clock, click, 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 clicks like a metronome, relentless as a heart we couldn't stop. I do it okay, time? Like 5 minutes. 5 minutes, okay. I think I can manage to read the rest. It's just 3 more. Another little side note, when a good friend of mine recently read that poem, she said, "Oh, it's so cute." I was going for it, but thank you. Tough as nails. She trimmed mine with those tiny, slim, curved silver scissors until I got old enough to manage the clippers myself. She filed hers with one of those emery boards kept in her purse or a drawer, or the pen and pencil cup by the phone. Mine needed to be kept short for playing piano. My first teacher's first lesson, no clicks on the keys. Hers would break while gardening or cleaning. She cursed each time it happened, the same finger again. Neither of us bit ours nor hit our thumbs while hammering. I never put polish on mine, unlike my peers, preferring them plain. She usually painted hers, red and pink hues, like the roses she grew. I used mine to scratch at acne scabs, and she'd scold, "Don't pick." She used hers to scratch her balding scalp, and I'd wonder, does it hurt? So this next one, I just have 2 more. Kind of refers to this, my childhood piano, which I had moved from New York State to Massachusetts via Vermont. So the piano mentioned here is that piano. And this also quotes some things from Wikipedia. When I looked up, I'm drawing a blank. Cremation. When I looked up cremation on Wikipedia, it gave me some things that I put in this poem. Not all that remains is bone. How heavy it was, brought home and placed on the piano. A plain, square cardboard box. Inside it, a plastic box. Inside that, a plastic bag. Inside that, the cremated remains are not ashes in the usual sense. After incineration is completed, the dry bone fragments are pulverized. How do I explain why, after all these years, I decide to buy an urn, a small, delicate container, handmade from unglazed pottery, burnished with terra sigillata, and fired in an outdoor kiln? I place the urn on the piano, which lives at my home now. I fill it with regret for not having saved any of the fine sand. And since I started with a sonnet, I'll end with a sonnet. And the title of this one references what's commonly called the Prayer of St. Francis. Make me an instrument. She drew the bass and treble clefs, a grand staff, E.G. B.D.F. Every good boy does fine, and F.A.C.E. labeled lines and spaces on a piece of paper. Middle C was tagged with tape. Her younger sister's books, marked with words of praise and sticker stars, were in the bench. I sat and played every evening after dinner, faithful, practicing beginner exercises. I obeyed whose will then, hers or mine? How can I keep these keys in tune? Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Lisa. Those were really wonderful to hear, and so many new poems since the book.
New old phone.
New old poems. Okay, our next reader is a novelist, historian, and editor, Diane Josefowicz.
Yep, that's
Wow, and I got it the
Yeah.
first time. And then Diane Josefowicz grew up outside Providence, where she now lives with her family. Ready, Set, O, which I forgot to hold up. Ready, Set, O, is her new novel, her first novel, I should say, and her second, L'air du Temps, 1985, is forthcoming in 2024 from Regal House. She serves as reviews editor at Necessary Fiction, reviews editor, okay, I'm just saying, associate fiction editor at West Trade Review, and director of communications for Swing Left Rhode Island, a progressive organization focused on electoral work. Please welcome Diane.
Thank you for that introduction. And thanks all for coming tonight, braving the cold. I'm just gonna get right to it. You folks are a very hard act to follow. So I'm gonna do my best with this. To start, I want to tell you a little bit about this section of the book I'm going to read. It's summer 1967, outside Providence, Rhode Island. Can you hear me okay in the back? Yes. Okay. And this is where the Batuta family is in turmoil. A family patriarch has just died. His grandson Tino is 21 years old, and he's just left medical school for reasons only he knows. The war in Vietnam is raging, and now that Tino has lost his deferment, he's likely to be drafted any day. In the meantime, his prospects are few. He can get a job as a golf caddy or maybe work at his father's button factory, but the business isn't doing so well. To make things even more complicated, his girlfriend Primrose is recovering from a nervous breakdown, and she's just about to discover that she's pregnant with his baby. This is in 1967. Pre-Roe, we seem to be moving back into this framework. As the novel opens, it's the morning of the wake, and it's just been discovered that one very important piece of the dead man's funeral outfit has not made it to the funeral home. And Tino's mother, who's in charge of this detail, is very upset. So, the beginning of the book, but it's not quite the beginning. So, Tino Batuta, the younger son of Tavio Brindisi's youngest daughter, set his razor on the sink's edge and smoothed his hair with a comb, which came away full. If it was true what they said, that baldness traveled down the maternal line, by this time next year he looked just like Papa Tavio. Not that an undiminished head of hair would do him much good now. Death traveled down every line and was the last stop, in fact. You'd have morbid thoughts too, if you had just made yourself one egg. In the kitchen, Tino's mother maneuvered an over-easy from frying pan to plate. She had been up to raise the sun, lashes curled and nose powdered, her apron strings looped and bow-tied at her waist. Her father might be dead, but she was unfazed, already up, already at him, whoever they were. Egg Tino? No thanks. His appetite had been AWOL for some days. Suit yourself. Into the pan went another egg. She poked it with a spatula, slitting the yolk the way Papa Tavio liked, as if she still expected him to show up for breakfast. Mom. Tino came up behind her and killed the heat. Stop. She relinquished the spatula with a look that was no match for Tino, even after the long training in heartlessness that was first-year medical school. He led her to the table where someone, most likely his father, had piled the mail. And next to the centerpiece, a cut crystal bowl filled with Hershey's Kisses, was Papa Tavio's gray top hat. That's the piece that's been left. Oh, for heaven's sake, can you believe this? And she sank into a chair. I'm sure the top hat was the last thing on his mind, Tino said. He was dying after all. No, I don't mean Tavio. I mean Dom Carcieri, that nincompoop of an undertaker who promised he'd take care of it. Brayton glanced at the clock on the wall. Tino, run the hat over the funeral parlor, will you please? There's just time. The wake won't start for an hour. You want me to put it on his head? Well, I suppose you could hand it to Dom Carcieri, she sighed, although we all know how unreliable he turned out to be. It's just a hat. You're giving me an argument today? Fine, he'd do it. Of course he would. But will you stop with the eggs? She threw up her arms. You need to eat. You're too thin. And Tino didn't need to respond. They knew their lines well enough to avoid further rehearsals of the little feeding drama which had been playing out ever since the moment he discovered his freedom to spit out whatever she spooned into his mouth. Not that he remembered the details, just the feeling of power, a can-do feeling. It didn't take much to ruin her day. Seeking distraction, his mother sifted the mail on the table. Spying Justine's letter, Tino slipped the envelope from the pile and tucked it into his suit's inside pocket. What's that, Tino? Nothing you don't already know. What in the world were you thinking? It was less a question than a prayer. Are you planning to do what all the other boys are doing, giving their parents agita, tuning in and tuning out? The last thing I have, Mom, is a plan. I don't understand it. A smart boy like you signed your death warrant, Tino. How could he tell her? The dean's decision felt less like a death warrant than a new lease on life. In St. Louis, he'd volunteered in emergency 3 nights a week, where he learned he had no stomach for the nitty-gritty of medicine, the gore, the urgency, the terrible responsibility. After it was all over, he felt light and pure as oxygen, relieved of burdens he didn't even know he'd taken on. Lorraine reached into the bowl of Hershey Kisses. They were her go-to solace, something she dipped into whenever she was, as she said, under a strain. The father and I are discussing it. She unwrapped a candy with her nimble Brindisi fingers and popped it between her lips. And until we've come to a decision, she said around the chocolate, you will not say a single word, nothing. Silence. When something needs to be said, your father will say it, and you will agree to whatever it is, you understand? He did. Not that he expected anything too magnificently forgiving about whatever story his parents dreamed up. His father raged hot and hard. Just this morning, Tino had opened his eyes to his father's roaring over some stupidity that had gone down overnight at Reliable Button, where bits of plastic were turned into brightly colored gewgaws through a complicated process involving heavy machinery, dozens of nimble-fingered employees, an array of glues and solvents whose exact composition was a closely guarded secret. Leon's roaring was followed by the front door's heavy slam. Lorraine unwrapped another candy and offered it to Tino. For a moment, he remembered what it was like to want to eat. The sugar needled his molars, but that was just fine. For all he cared, his teeth could fall right out of his head. At least then he might be 4F, deferred, safe, for now anyway. Whatever Dad wants to say can wait until the funeral is over, he said. That's up to your father. Don't I get any say in this? It's my reputation we're talking about. You should have thought of that before you did what you did. Thanks, he said, not thankful at all. Now don't you be fresh. Sorry, another lie. You need to make some kind of, she struggled to find the right word. Well, an adjustment, an arrangement. You don't have much time. I know. Do you? Do you even see the body bags all over the television every night? That's how kids are coming back. Kids, sons, Tino. Just because we don't yet know anyone in those bags doesn't mean we never will. They're not just for show, you know. Ma, I know. And how he did. And that girlfriend of yours, you're always picking on her. You've been dating for 2 years. Her parents will have expectations. She unwrapped a third chocolate. Not to mention, she's just spent 2 months in the loony bin. It's a crazy time, Ma. People go crazy. Not like that. Except it was just like that. The news had come near Christmas while he'd been preparing for the fall term's exams. Primrose had gone away. For a rest was how her father put it, his voice tiny over the telephone. In the dormitory's hallway, Tino crammed the phone to his ear, trying to remember the last time they'd talked. She had joined an anti-war group, and he ascribed her excited mood to ordinary causes, a new activity, new friends. She has a chemical imbalance in her brain, her father told him. There had been shock treatments, wet packs, pills. Later, over the 4 precious weeks of Christmas break, he listened to her newly monotonous voice and wondered about the odd blank look that came over her face when she didn't think he was watching. She was mostly herself otherwise, steadfast in her affection, ardent on their drives. Perhaps he just imagined the changes. Tina's mother was still talking. All I'm saying, Tino, is that you can't always have things your way. Sometimes you have to do things for other people. Tino's breath escaped loudly through his nose, a skeptical noise, but also a beaten one. Under normal circumstances, a guy in his situation could come home to find steady work or open a business, settle down, but these were not normal circumstances. He was free to choose between dying relatively soon in a distant jungle for nothing, less than nothing, and dying somewhat later, doing something he would probably hate, all the while worrying about going up in a mushroom cloud or worse, surviving the initial blast, only to become a radioactive popsicle when the ashes of civilization blotted out the sun. Some freedom, some choice. America was as solid as a block of Swiss cheese with holes you could slip through, and poof, that was your life, your one life. His mother's eyes filled. What, Ma? She blinked several times quickly, and the mistiness evaporated. Pushing her lips together, she replied through the tight line they made. I just can't stand to see you make another mistake. The watch. Tino knelt before the coffin, angling the hat one way and then another. Papa Tavio looked ready for a fight, his chin jutting up and out as if he were already at the pearly gates arguing his case with St. Peter. Tamping down his revulsion, Tino slipped a hand beneath the old man's head. It would be tricky to lift without making a pig's breakfast of the undertaker's work. A chemical whiff rose from the body, spiriting Tino back to St. Louis, where he spent the autumn hacking at a pickled cadaver. The professor had mocked Tino's dissections, lifting the ravaged tissues with a scalpel, a pencil point, and a chopstick from his lunch. All the structures looked the same and nothing like the illustrations in Gray's Anatomy. By the time Tino finished, he was half pickled himself, and the stink no longer came off in the shower. When the class was finally over, he burned his lab clothes. The smoke smelled worse than formaldehyde, but unlike formaldehyde, it just blew away. Gravel crunched in the parking lot, the noise of his family arriving, early birds getting the day's sad worm. Tino nudged the hat again. If he failed at this task, his mother would give him hell. And if he got it really wrong, say by losing the hat or allowing it to be crushed after carelessly setting it on the chair where his big cousin Aldo was about to take a load off, he would never hear the end of it. Still, he saw no clear path to his goal. Or well, he thought I tried. He set the hat on Papa Tavio's chest and tiptoed backwards as if his grandfather's body were a live grenade, as if the hat were its pin. I hate to disturb you, Tino started. While he'd been lost in his thoughts, Mr. Carcieri had crept up on him. Easy does it. He rested his heavy hand on Tino's shoulder. Properly speaking, it should be on his head. And with that, Mr. Carcieri left, his jacket vents flapping. On his way out, he passed Tino's mother, who was seeing Tino at the casket blanched beneath her makeup. Tino felt the assessment in his tightening chest. He was fucking up as usual. She pointed toward the door where coat hooks lined part of the wall. Tino hurried over, intending to catch the hat on a hook and be done with it. No such luck. The hook, missing a bracket screw, twisted in the wall and tipped the hat to the floor. Crouching to nab the fugitive, Tino discovered instead the missing bracket screw rolling from side to side on the carpet in a dime-sized puddle of lights. His mother's black pumps crossed his field of vision, and then her face appeared, seemingly upside down, seemingly younger by a decade, the effect of being upside down. You'd think a boy your age could manage just one simple thing. His mother's hiss smelled of chocolate. One simple thing. Tino heaved himself to his feet and back toward the lobby, muttering apologies he knew by heart. There were advantages to a hardened one. A year ago, he would have resented his mother for all of it, from the absurd task she had set him to the insult she'd just lobbed his way. But his days of petty filial grievance were behind him. He was in a new country now, beyond her good opinion. Smartly turned out in his army dress uniform, Tino's brother Pat was loitering by the back door. He eyed Tino with a practiced thoroughness, taking him in from nose to wingtips like a butcher, considering the most efficient way to hack a carcass. By some tacit agreement, this look had always been his prerogative. Did you actually flunk out, Tino, or were you kicked? None of your business. Heat rose up the back of Tino's neck. No use getting yourself worked up, Pat sneered, the way you do. Regardless of what you actually did, the fact is you're up shit creek without a popsicle stick. Sayonara deferment. Failing to light a cigarette with a single match, he tried again with several and nearly singed his eyebrows. When at last he lit his smoke, he blew the first one into Tino's face. Uncle Sam won't front you a proper Zippo. Tino coughed into his fist, keeping the other safely balled up in his pocket so it would not accidentally connect with Pat's jaw. Uncle Sam is the least of my problems, Pat said, but unlike yours, mine are only romantic. Pat's letters home, posted from a West German army garrison, foamed over with stories of ample-bosomed local beauties bearing steins full of beer. Even so, Tino suspected at least a few of his feminine interests on the home front were also receiving regular assurances of devotion. Irene called yesterday. Pat dragged nervously on a cigarette. She told Mom she might come. Last year, Pat had dumped Irene, a girl next door brunette with a big smile and an impenetrable bouffant. Right after their mother had taken a shine to her. This was the kiss of death, as far as Tino could tell. Oh, you'll be all right, Tino said. Irene only loves the uniform. Says you. Pat shook out his pant legs one at a time. Jesus Christ, but I'm nervous today. Well, it seems we both got our problems. I'm just trying to look out for you, Tino. In that case, do me a favor. Don't say a word to anyone about school, okay? Let Dad handle it. Sure. Pat towed his spent cigarette into the gravel. It's your funeral, or it will be. Mourners passed like the cigarettes Pat was smoking one after the other. A petite woman enveloped Tino in a fug of flowery perfume. Such a fine man, your Papa Tavia, she gushed. What a craftsman. Look at his suit. Can't find craftsmanship like this nowadays, the man beside her remarked, pumping Tino's arm. Everything's made in Japan. Tino moved them onto Pat, the next link in the chain, and the ritual continued. So sorry, isn't it awful? We meet at wakes. A handshake, air kiss. Who's next? Repetition numbed him, leaving him unprepared for his first glimpse of Primrose in the doorway, tugging one long black glove up one long pale arm. Her black dress, nipped at the waist and none too long, showed off her figure. His clasp ring with its chunk of onyx swung from a chain around her neck. Catching his eye, she smiled. Oh, Primrose. He closed the space between them in quick steps. His thudding heart made conversation difficult, but the solution to that problem was a no-brainer. You taste like bubblegum, he said when they came up for air. Hubba hubba, she said. She noticed his transition to imbecility. She didn't let on. The gum went round in her mouth and disappeared. I'm sorry about Papa Tavio. He sneezed and sneezed again and again. The flowers, every surface was larded with them, stuffed into vases and shooting from pots. She drew back. Stop that. I have allergies, he snuffled. I can't just stop sneezing. He pointed to a white splotch on her upper arm. What's this? Do you always have to criticize me? She rubbed the spot until the black tip of her gloved finger turned gray. Look, it's just paint. Despite Dr. Feelgood's zombie pills, I actually worked on a canvas this morning. Those zombie pills were keeping her coherent and upright. Did you hear me, Tino? What were you painting? Snow, she retorted. Macarons, milk. I was just asking one simple question. No, you aren't, she snapped as she tugged at her hem, making final adjustments. Never mind. Apart from the smudge, do I look all right? Well, that was a simple question. You look beautiful. She smiled wanly, offering détente, if not exactly peace. He took her arm and they made their way to the front of the room. Standing sentry by the foot of the casket, Pat greeted Primrose by taking her hand in both of his. On the other side, at the start of the receiving line, Lorraine fanned herself with a prayer card illustrated with Jesus wincing beneath his crown of thorns. Tino, she trilled, ignoring Primrose, your father's here. Thanks, he wanted to tell Lorraine, for the warning. In the lobby, just visible from where Tino stood, Tino's father was extracting himself from a clutch of nervy-looking men. They were the sort Leon privately derided as fellas, wise guys being a little too on the nose. Lupa and fibula, Pat observed. Fabula, Tino corrected him, sweat breaking out along his hairline, what remained of it. Fibula is the bone. You would know, Pat sneered, or maybe you wouldn't. Primrose inhaled sharply, and Tino squeezed her arm. If Pat had guessed the truth, so what? Boys, Lorraine said warningly, your father has been making buttons all morning. Tino's heart dislodged itself, a button slipping from its whip-stitched hole. But he's always making buttons. That's just what he does, Pat muttered. He makes buttons. Don't be fresh, snapped Lorraine.
And this is why they.
Primrose knelt by the coffin, her head bent over her clasped arm. A few wisps had escaped her chignon, and seeing them, Tino fought back a wave of tenderness. She put in the work today, trying to look right. Lorraine reached past Primrose to fuss with the carnation and Papa Tavio's lapel. Lorraine, Leon cried out, my God, don't do that. Just a minute. She fished a toothpick from her handbag, placed it between Papa Tavio's lips, and gave his chest a thump. There, she said, much better. That really happened. Primrose's eyes were round as the marbles she'd lately been so good at losing. Leon put his hand on his wife's arm. You can't just start him, Lorraine. From her bag, she withdrew a Hershey's Kiss, which she peeled expertly despite her gloves. Where have you been all morning? One of the painters had a conniption. I'll give you a conniption. She cast a final appraising glance at Papa Tavio just in case there was anything else she could improve. Jumpstart in my foot. Mom, Tino said, please, Mom, sit down. She let Tino help her to an empty seat. Primrose followed. Mrs. Batuta, I'm so sorry if you're lost, Primrose murmured robotically. Anxiety, Tino guessed, or the pills. Lorraine gazed at her, taking in everything from her messy bun to her discount shoes. You're such a pretty girl, she sniffed. Why don't you trim your hair so you don't have to work so hard to make it nice? Primrose's snuffed out expression nodded Tino's gut, which is why when his mother offered Primrose a Hershey's kiss, Tino wasn't surprised to hear Primrose refuse. I don't want to get fat, she said. Lorraine scowled. I can't for the life of me understand you modern girls. Some minutes later, Tino's mother was waving the obituary around, irritated because the editor had cut a line she'd written about Papa Tavio being from where he always said he was from, Bacausa Natale, which meant, and I should have mentioned this earlier, it comes up before. I'm sorry to say this, it means original shithole. He didn't like where he was from in Naples, so that's how he referred to it. The Gaw. Papa Tavio didn't like to talk about where he was from, Pat said, so why should we? He was honest, his mother said. He told it like it was. Tino sensed a different reason for his mother's irritation. She didn't like being the subject of someone else's improvements, even if they were just on paper. Now she started improving Tino, straightening his tie and brushing at his shoulders. She lifted his lapel and ran her hand along its length, her touch firm enough to let him know she knew her stuff. This was the essence of Lorraine's charm. If you were good enough, like a fabric with a dry hand and nice drape, she was in a position to appreciate it, and moreover, she would not stint. But there was the catch, it had to be good enough, and so few were. The cloth of this suite, she said, is older than Papa Tavio. Do you recognize it? Nope. But I'm sure we'd love to hear all about it, Primrose interjected. The remark sounded innocent enough, even nice, but was there something off about it? He squeezed her hand just in case. The suit was made from the bolt of cloth that Papa Tavio brought with him to America, along with his pincushion and his good scissors. That's all he had with him when he got off the boat, right where near the sewers drain into the bay. Oh, the stink. Lorraine wrinkled her nose and fanned herself with migraine Jesus. All his life, she couldn't believe his first impression of America was a cesspit. That's what he always said. If you're too fat to leave one shithole soon enough, you'll wind up in another. Tino, who had heard this all before, just shrugged. Providence was nothing compared to St. Louis, which was the biggest shithole he'd ever seen. Well, that was his opinion, for which no one had asked. So many thoughts he was obliged to keep quiet. It was isolating, feeling like you couldn't just state the facts, the truth you saw with your own eyes. For Papa Tavio, Pat said that shithole line was the secret of life, which brought back a memory. On the porch years before, Tino had asked Papa Tavio to tell him just that, the secret of life. Even then, the phrase sounded ridiculous, but he didn't know any better way to say it. He was distracted by his backside, which hurt from his father's most recent walloping. For what infraction, he no longer remembered. All he wanted was to be on good terms with his father, but he never seemed to manage it. He wondered what he lacked. What was the secret of life? His grandfather groaned as he hoisted him onto the porch rail. Look who's getting big. Come on, Papa T, I asked you a question. Papa Tavio moved his mouth, settling his dentures. The first secret of life, he told Tino, is very simple. You just make a living, enough for a nice house, a car, a son's education. Plucked his toothpick from between his lips and waved it. Are you listening? Attaboy. Here it is, the second secret of life. After you eat the food you put on the table with your own hard work, you chew one of these, so everyone knows you ate something besides green beans. So that was it. Secret of life was to make money and chew a toothpick so everyone knew what your life was worth. The last section. When the undertaker returned to pay his respects, Tino overheard his mother describing him to Mr. Carcieri as the son who used to go to medical school. Christ almighty, Tino muttered, scanning the room. He lost track of his father. Pat also had vamoosed, a lucky development. You might as well call the Associated Press, Ma. Tino, sta calma. Mr. Carcieri pressed both hands downward against an invisibly burgeoning chaos. Your Uncle Tavio was a good man. Not many like him left nowadays. An honest man, his mother interjected. A hardworking and honest man. Of course, Mr. Carcieri patted her arm. Don't believe everything you read in the newspaper, Lorraine said. From Mr. Carcieri's puzzled look, Tino guessed he hadn't seen the obituary. What are you going to do now, son? He asked Tino. The man's breath stank of aniseed biscuits. His eyes were like old coins. I'm not your son. Ah, wise guy. Mr. Carcieri clapped Tino hard on the back. I'm sure no matter what you decide to do, you'll make us proud with the rest of our boys, show them what we're made of here in America. He'll do no such thing, Lorraine cut in. If Tino goes, it'll be over my dead body. Lorraine, again, he made the staccato gesture. Let us not speak of that. Please do not speak of that, Primrose said. There was an awkward silence. Mr. Carcieri salvaged the moment by encompassing Tino and Primrose in a big aniseed-scented embrace. And you punked out, Tino, so what? He whispered in Tino's ear. You'll do all right by us in some other way, assuming the army don't do it for you. That's simple logic, huh? He stepped back and leered at Primrose. And you'll stay home, do your time like the rest of us, make your baby. Primrose smiled without showing her teeth. Just don't let me catch you on the television, setting fire to government property while you give your parents agita. Then the undertaker took off, leaving his halitosis in Tino's nose. His back stung where he'd been slapped, and his mind kept returning to the same difficult places. Primrose's illness, medical school, the war. Would he be drafted only to be borne back to Mr. Carcer's funeral home in a box? Was he seeing the future in advance? He shivered. The lilies exhaled pollen. His legs itched. If his suit was Italian from Italy, so were the allergens embedded in it, pricking him like so many bad memories. I need some air, he said, and bolted for the door. Lorraine shook her head. Ants in his pants, just like my father. Not a single one of these men can sit still for an instant. And how does the blood run true? Bleed through, Primrose replied absently, her eyes gazing. His mother subsided into her chair, fanning herself with Papa Tavio's obituary.
I think a round of applause for everyone for the open mic and our features, fabulous features. And a big thank you to IAWA Books. Thanks for being our home. Thank you for coming. Thank you.